Night my sister announced her promotion at our parents' anniversary dinner, she looked straight at me and said, "Honestly, having Sophia handle the grunt work freed me up to focus on the real strategy." She smiled when she said it, like it was a compliment. The table laughed. My dad raised his glass. Her director, who had been invited as a family friend, did not laugh. He set down his fork. He looked at my sister, then at me, and something shifted behind his eyes. I didn't know it then. I was too busy pressing my thumbnail into my palm under the table, hard enough to leave a mark, just so I had something to focus on besides the burning in my face. That was the moment everything started to unravel for her. I just didn't get to see it for another 3 months. Let me back up. My name is Sophia. I'm 29 years old. I have a master's degree in UX design from Carnegie Mellon, 3 years of freelance experience before I ever touched a corporate job, and a portfolio that got me a callback from 4 different companies the one time I actually submitted it myself. My sister Vanessa is 34. She has a business degree from a school I won't name, a talent for presenting other people's ideas as her own, and the kind of confidence that comes from never once having been told no by anyone in our family. We both work at the same mid-sized tech company in Austin, or we did. That part of the story comes later. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. All of it. When I graduated with my master's, I had one job offer, and approximately $43,000 in student debt. The job offer was in Phoenix. It paid $62,000 a year. I was ready to take it. Then my sister called. She had just been promoted to senior product manager at her company, our company now, and she said she'd put in a word for me. There was a junior UX designer opening. The pay wasn't great, $54,000 to start, but it was Austin. It was closer to home, and Vanessa made it sound like it was practically already mine if I wanted it. "It'll be good for us," she said. "Working together." I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed that she said "for us" instead of "for you." But I was 26 and tired, and I wanted to stop floating, so I said yes. I got the job. I moved to Austin. I found a one-bedroom apartment 17 minutes from the office, and I went to work. For the first 6 months, everything was fine. I was assigned to Vanessa's product team, which felt a little awkward but manageable. I did my work. I built wireframes, conducted user research, put together presentation decks for stakeholder reviews. My direct manager, a quiet woman named Helen, told me at my 3-month review that I had exceptional instincts, and she was glad to have me. Then Helen went on extended medical leave, and everything changed. With Helen out, Vanessa became the de facto lead on our team's design decisions. She had no UX background, her role was purely product strategy, but she had seniority and she had volume. Vanessa could fill a room with words in a way that made people assume she knew what she was talking about. The first time she presented my work as her own, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. I had built out a complete user flow for a new onboarding feature. 47 screens, 2 weeks of iteration. I had the Figma file, the research notes, the version history with my name on every single frame. Vanessa presented it to the VP of Product in a Thursday afternoon review and said, "I've been reworking our onboarding approach. Here's where I landed." Afterward, I went to her office and closed the door. "You didn't mention that I built that," I said. She looked up from her laptop with an expression I can only describe as bored. "I presented the team's work," she said. "That's what managers do, Sophia. That's literally the job. You said I've been reworking. You said here's where I landed. It's a figure of speech." I stood there for a moment, not sure what to do with that. She had already looked back down at her screen. I left. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. Over the next year and a half, a pattern developed. I would do the work, Vanessa would present it. When praise came down from above, it landed on her. When questions came, she would redirect them to me. "Sophia can walk you through the details," in a way that made me sound like a technician rather than the person who had made every single creative and structural decision. I started keeping records, not because I had a plan, but because something in me knew I needed to. I saved every Figma version history, every Slack message where I sent her completed files, every email where I provided research summaries that showed up word for word in her presentations. I have a folder on my personal hard drive labeled Project Files, Archive. It's organized by date. There are hundreds of items in it. Meanwhile, Vanessa got another promotion, Director of Product now. 68% raise, according to what she told our mother, who told me. My salary had gone from 54,000 to 61,000 over 3 years, a raise of about 13% total. When I asked HR about a title change, I was told it would need to come through my direct manager. My direct manager was now, officially, my sister. I want to be clear about something. I was not a pushover in every area of my life. I had friends, I had a social life, I went to therapy every other week, and I was working through a lot of things. But at work, around Vanessa, I had this paralysis that I couldn't fully explain at the time. It was a family thing. It was complicated in the way that things are always complicated when the person exploiting you is someone you grew up sharing a bathroom with, someone you know the childhood of, someone your parents would take sides with before the sentence was even finished. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting defeat. I stayed because I kept thinking it would get better. I stayed because every time I came close to updating my resume, Vanessa would do something almost kind. Praise me in a team meeting, bring me coffee, forward me a compliment from a client, and I would talk myself back down. This is the part I'm not proud of. But it's the truth. My parents' 30th anniversary was in October. My mom had been planning it for months. She booked a private room at a restaurant in the hill country, outside Austin stone walls, Edison bulbs, the kind of place that costs $400 a head and feels worth it. She invited about 30 people, close family, a few old friends, and because my parents have always mixed their social worlds, a handful of people from their professional lives. One of those people was Griffin Cole. Griffin was the VP of Product Innovation at our company. He had hired Vanessa 2 years earlier, and they had developed what my parents described as a mentorship friendship. He came to the anniversary dinner because my dad had helped him find a house in Austin when Griffin first relocated. And my dad is the kind of person people feel genuinely grateful toward. I had met Griffin twice before, briefly, in passing at the office. He was in his mid-40s, measured in the way that people who have seen a lot of workplace drama learn to be. And he had the habit of going very still when he was paying attention. I didn't think much about him being there. I was in charge of the table centerpieces my mom had asked. I had spent a weekend making them, and I was focused on getting through dinner without anything going wrong. The centerpieces were small potted rosemary plants shaped into topiaries, tied with a ribbon printed with my parents' names and the date. My mom cried when she saw them. That part was good. The dinner itself was good too, for about the first hour. Vanessa had been drinking since before we sat down. Not enough to seem drunk, just enough to be more of herself. Louder, more self-referential, more likely to redirect any conversation back to her own recent wins. She had been promoted the month before. Director of Product officially. She had gotten a write-up in the company newsletter. She had bought herself a new car. At some point during the main course, my dad asked her to share some highlights from her year. It was a casual question, the kind of question parents ask at family dinners when they want to give someone a moment in the spotlight. What followed was an 11-minute monologue. I'm not exaggerating. I counted eventually when I replayed it in my head. Vanessa talked about the new product roadmap she had designed from the ground up. She talked about the design language overhaul that had redefined the user experience across 3 platforms. She talked about the onboarding conversion improvements that had increased activation rates by 31% in Q3. I had built the roadmap. I had led the design language overhaul. I had done the research, the testing, and the iteration that drove the Q3 numbers. I sat across the table, and I ate my steak, and I said nothing. Then Vanessa looked at me, directly at me, with this small smile, and she said, "Honestly, having Sophia handle the grunt work freed me up to focus on the real strategy." She turned back to Griffin when she said it, like she was explaining her management philosophy. Like it was a perfectly reasonable thing to say at your parents' anniversary dinner about the sister sitting 4 feet away from you. My mother laughed nervously. My dad raised his glass. Two aunts smiled vaguely. Griffin did not laugh. He reached for his water glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm. A few minutes later, he turned to me. "Which projects were you most involved in this year?" he asked. It was a quiet question, conversational. But Vanessa's head turned about half an inch. "The design language overhaul, mostly," I said. I kept my voice neutral. "And the onboarding work. The full flow, or specific components. The full flow. All 47 screens. The research, the testing, the iterations. He nodded slowly. Vanessa cut in. Sophia's great at the execution side, she said brightly. That's really where she shines. Griffin looked at her for a moment. Then he looked back at me. Do you have a portfolio online? He asked. Yes, I said. I'd love to see it sometime. He said it simply, like it was nothing. He went back to his dinner. Vanessa changed the subject. I didn't sleep well that night. 3 days later, I got a calendar invite from Griffin's executive assistant. Subject line, informal coffee, 20 minutes. I almost canceled it twice. I didn't understand what was happening. I told myself not to read into it. I went. Griffin's office was on the 14th floor, the kind of corner situation with a view of the city that you only get once you have real organizational power. He had a coffee already waiting for me when I arrived, which meant he had asked someone what I ordered, which meant he had looked me up enough to know who to ask. We talked for 40 minutes. He asked me to walk him through my actual contribution to the projects Vanessa had named at dinner. I had anticipated this, or something like it. I had brought my laptop. I opened the Figma files. I showed him the version history. I walked him through the research documentation, the testing notes, the presentation decks with my name on the original drafts before they were reformatted for Vanessa's reviews. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. How long has this been going on? He asked. I thought about it. Since about 6 months after I joined, I said, consistently for the last 18 months. Did you document all of it? Yes. He nodded. I want to be transparent with you, he said. I've had some questions about the attribution on several of these projects for a while. Some of the technical depth in the presentations hasn't always matched what I'd expect from Vanessa's background, but I didn't have enough to act on. He paused. This is enough, he said. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant in that moment. I didn't. I felt sick, not because I regretted showing him, but because it was my sister. Because I knew what was coming and I knew it would be bad, and even then, even after everything, there was a part of me that wished it had never gotten this far. I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I texted my therapist and asked if she had any openings that week. She did. It took about 5 weeks. I don't know all of the details of what happened internally. I know what I was told, and I know what I eventually pieced together from what Vanessa said to me in the single conversation we had afterward. HR opened an investigation. They reviewed the file records, the version histories, the Slack logs. They interviewed several people on our team, including a junior developer named, I'll call him my former coworker, who had apparently been uncomfortable with the credit situation for a long time and said so plainly when asked. Vanessa was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. 3 weeks after that, she was terminated. The official reason cited was misrepresentation of work product and repeated failure to appropriately attribute team contributions in leadership contexts. I know this because Vanessa told me in a phone call that lasted 8 minutes and consisted mostly of her telling me that I had betrayed the family and destroyed her career. I let her talk. When she was finished, I said, I didn't go to Griffin, he came to me. She hung up. Here's what happened to me. 2 weeks after Vanessa's termination, I was called into a meeting with Griffin and the head of HR. I expected some kind of uncomfortable conversation about the situation, about my role in what had happened, about next steps. Instead, Griffin slid a folder across the table. It was a formal offer. Senior UX designer with a clear path to lead. The salary was $91,000. That was a 49% increase from where I was. I looked at the number for what was probably too long. We've also backlogged your project attributions in our internal records, Griffin said. The roadmap, the design overhaul, the Q3 onboarding work, those are credited to you now. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. You should have been recognized for this work when it was happening, he said. I'm sorry that the systems in place didn't catch it sooner. I signed the offer letter that afternoon. My parents didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. My mom called me eventually. I think my aunt talked to her. And the conversation was hard and incomplete and didn't resolve much. She said she understood that what Vanessa had done wasn't right. She also said I should have come to her first. I didn't point out that going to her first would have resulted in exactly nothing except Vanessa knowing I was onto her. My dad took longer. He's a fair man generally, but Vanessa has always been his daughter in a specific way that I was not. And I don't mean that as a self-pity statement, just as a fact. It took him about 4 months to call me. When he did, he said he was proud of me. I don't think he fully meant it yet, but I think he was trying to, and for now that's enough. Vanessa and I haven't spoken since that phone call. I don't know what she's doing now. I heard through my cousin that she took a contract job somewhere in the Northeast. I hope she's okay. I mean that genuinely. I don't want her to suffer. I just also don't want her back in my life, in any capacity where she has authority over me. I think about that dinner sometimes. The rosemary topiaries on the tables, the way the light hit the stone walls. My mom in a green dress she'd bought 3 weeks early because she was so excited. I think about pressing my thumbnail into my palm and saying nothing while my sister explained to her future boss why my work was really just grunt work. I think about Griffin going still the way he did, reaching for his water glass, setting it down. I think about how I almost didn't show up to that coffee meeting, how I sat in my car and talked myself into it by saying it was just 20 minutes. It was just coffee. And if nothing came of it, I could go back to updating my resume. The thing is, I had been waiting for someone to notice for a long time. What I hadn't understood yet was that nobody was going to notice unless I let them see something real. I had the evidence. I had all of it, organized in a folder labeled with the most boring name I could think of, so it would never occur to anyone to ask about it. I had been collecting proof of my own competence like it was something shameful. It wasn't shameful. It was just mine. It still is. I'm a lead UX designer now. I got the promotion 8 months after the offer. I have 2 designers reporting to me, a third one starting in the spring. I work with a team that sends Slack messages that say things like, "Brilliant catch," and "This is exactly right," and I am still, sometimes, startled by them. Because I spent 3 years in an environment where those words went to someone else. I'm still in therapy, still working through what it means to have had your worth systematically redirected by someone you loved. Still figuring out the family stuff, which is slower and less satisfying than the professional stuff and doesn't come with a tidy ending. But I have my name on my work now. Every file, every presentation, every design that ships. My name. That's what I want you to hold on to if you're somewhere in the middle of this kind of thing right now. The part where you're pressing your thumbnail into your palm and saying nothing and telling yourself it's fine. It'll get better. It's not worth the fight. Document everything. Keep the receipts. Know your worth in numbers, not just feelings. And when someone asks to see your work, show them all of it. I've thought a lot about why it took so long, not why Griffin eventually saw the truth. That part makes sense to me now. But why I let it go on for as long as I did. Why I kept showing up, kept building, kept handing things over and telling myself it was fine. The honest answer is that I confused loyalty with silence. I thought staying quiet was the same as being a good sister, a good daughter, a team player. I thought that if I just kept doing excellent work, eventually the right people would notice without me having to say a word. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Talent doesn't announce itself. Evidence doesn't file itself. Nobody is sitting in a corner office cataloging your contributions while you wait for fairness to find you. Vanessa understood something I didn't. For a long time, she understood that in most rooms, whoever speaks loudest gets the credit. She had built her entire career on that principle. The problem is that principle has a ceiling. You can only claim credit for work you didn't do for so long before someone who actually understands the work starts asking questions. Vanessa walked into that anniversary dinner confident and walked out without knowing her floor was already cracking. She didn't see Griffin's expression when she said grunt work. I did, and even I didn't fully understand what it meant until 3 days later. What I know now is that there is a kind of quiet integrity that builds and builds underground, like a root system, and it cannot be rushed and it cannot be faked. Every file I saved, every version history I preserved, every time I documented my own process not because I had a plan, but because something in me refused to let my work disappear. That was the root system. I didn't know it would matter. I just knew I couldn't let myself become invisible without at least keeping a record that I had been there. That's the thing about doing the right thing consistently. Even when no one is watching and no one is rewarding you for it, it accumulates. Vanessa's shortcuts accumulated too in the other direction. And eventually, the two things met in a room on the 14th floor with a Figma file open on my laptop, and the math was not complicated. I'm not going to tell you that everything worked out perfectly, or that the family stuff resolved cleanly, because it didn't. My parents and I are still finding our way back to each other. There are dinners that are still a little stiff, conversations that stop just short of what really needs to be said. That part is slower, Real life is slower than a story. But I have my name on my work. I have a team that sees me clearly. I have the version of my career that I would have had 3 years earlier if I had trusted myself sooner and been less afraid of what honesty might cost me. The cost was real. I won't pretend otherwise. But what I was paying before, in silence, in credit, in the slow erosion of my own sense of what I was worth, that was a cost too. I was just so used to paying it that I had stopped noticing. Notice. Document. Show up for yourself the way you would show up for someone you love who was being treated the way you were being treated. That's it. That's the whole lesson. I just needed 3 years and a very still man reaching for a water glass to finally learn it.